full slate of commissioners, our administrator, the clerk of the board. I will call the meeting to order. If you would please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, the first item on the agenda is the approval of minutes for March 22nd. Is there any addition, correction?
No.
Okay. Office business, I believe we have 2 vouchers.
Move for approval of fund expenditures in a total amount of $256,889.12 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by 2 representatives of the auditor's office and the county administrator.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Move for approval of salary clearing payroll and emergency management payroll in a total amount of $867,727.46. And note, as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by 2 representatives of the auditor's office.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Next, we have consent item agendas. There is 6 items today.
Move for approval of consent agenda, 6 items, request discussion on item 3.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for the 6 consent items with discussion on 3. Please go ahead.
Mr. Johnson, on the E911 taxes to CCOM, the read ahead was pretty good, pretty clear. We just came up a little short on our budgeted amount. My question is, did we have unusually high expenses this year? Did we underestimate the budget just a little bit? And more importantly, is this a one-time situation, or should we think about bumping this budget in the future?
We will certainly have some discussion in the future about the budget as it relates to CCOM. This really is a one-time event that we just underestimated the budget, the available funds. So our responsibility under our contract with CCOM requires us to dedicate those funds to them. But this is more or less a one-time event.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second to pass the 6 items on the consent agenda. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Next, we'll move down to the commissioner administrator updates. Keith?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman. Over the past few days, and including today, we're having some meetings with each commissioner and our consultant that's helping Benton County Emergency Services. I serve on that board and have been for some time. As I've described before, we're undergoing some pretty significant strategic planning for the future of providing E911 services to the region. We have some deficiencies in our radio system, our microwave system, and we're trying to make sure all of the relative players in the region, not just Franklin County, but the cities in Franklin County, the Benton County, and the cities in Benton County as well, participating in this strategic planning effort to make sure that we can continue to provide timely 911 services to the community. So I've been involved in those discussions. Appreciate your time participating in those as well. Yesterday, during the WASAC virtual call, a presentation was given regarding cybersecurity. That has been an issue that I've had several discussions with our IS folks about making sure that our systems are secure. You heard a term yesterday called 2-factor identification. What that means is having an additional way other than just a password to have access to systems. We're moving in that direction. In many cases, we already have that for remote access, and we'll be bringing back some further discussions for the board to have 2-factor identification for all of our desktop computing devices, phones, whatever it may be, that would have access to any application or IT service that the county provides. So we're on top of that discussion. It's very much at the forefront of security, system security discussions nationwide, but clearly here in Franklin County too, we're paying attention to that. We met with our planning and building director and representatives from the city of Pasco regarding planning standards in those areas that will be anticipated to be annexed in the future. A lot of folks refer to those as the donut holes, and we've had several discussions regarding what standards are required by the city for us to approve development in those areas. And so we're continuing to have regular meetings with the city on not only that topic, but just joint planning efforts. And so appreciate Mr. Bratton's leadership in making that happen, and appreciate the city's cooperation. And then last week, Commissioner Didier, you raised a question about Franklin County's ability to influence decisions related to farm worker housing. Been doing quite a bit of research on that topic. The state has asserted primary authority over approval of those plans. They have continued to allow the county zoning to control setback, road access, and the height of the building, but that's really about the only zoning that they allow to the local jurisdictions. They have retained everything else with the State Department of Health. It's based on a history of substandard housing in certain parts of the state, and a number of years ago felt like the state was better equipped to manage that. So we recognize that can create some frustration for our local folks here, but that's kind of the current status of that RCW.
Yeah, not just frustration, but effect on their property values. And that's a concern.
Yeah. That's all I had as an update this morning. Thank you.
Commissioner Peck?
I just follow up on that last point. As I think I mentioned last week, we had a similar situation. Allen Brothers built a worker facility just on the north side of Sagemore, just north of where Columbia River and Sagemore come together. It was feared, I think, by the local community that was going to have a significant impact on traffic and values, and we learned a lot of the same things that you've heard today about the state having jurisdiction and control over that. And I'll just offer that while I don't agree with the state's dominance in approving development of any kind in our county without us having at least an equal voice, the fact of the matter is, I guess the GMA does that to us in many respects. But anyway, the point being that we haven't, to my knowledge, had any issues or concerns out of that particular development, nor the one that some North County farm community developed up near Ringgold. So I understand the concerns, just pointing out that the history so far has been good. But I agree with all the comments that have been made about the state ought not be usurping the county's authority so much in this arena. I had a couple of meetings this week with the Benton Franklin Council of Governments Economic Development District. There's an effort underway by several local jurisdictions to update the lighting on the cable bridge to modern LED changeable lighting for marketing and other purposes. The Council of Governments fulfilled its role not to own projects like this, but to bring all the key players to the table and build a team to go forward and take on the project, and that's what's happening with that one. Meeting Thursday with the Hanford Area Economic Investment Trust, HAFIC. It's a special meeting regarding some loan history and some challenges that HAFIC is looking at. On Monday, yesterday, we had the WASAC meeting that Keith already referred to regarding cybersecurity. And I would note that the gentleman from back east with Homeland Security that was giving the presentation suggested, actually outright said, that there are a number of free services that they can provide in the way of testing our systems for us remotely, and even some on-site help, I believe. So I would encourage us to get that information to IT so that they can take advantage of those services. And I know, Keith, you would have mentioned that, but for purposes of time, I thought I'd just add it in. And other than some constituent calls on some land use issues in Pasco, that's it for the week. Thanks.
Commissioner Mullen?
So I met with Tom French at the Hapo Center and just want to give an update that, in my opinion, he's doing a great job out there. They've really cut a lot of the expenses out. He's also got some upcoming events that he's working on that'll be a great, good, strong economic impact for our area. And also speaking with Tom, he had some, I believe, some good ideas and things that we should take a look at. He was saying that the lawn out in front of the Hapo Center is quite a challenge to keep maintained. Sprinklers are expensive, people driving through there, but maybe the possibility of looking at leasing those lots of land for restaurants or other businesses, and I think it's something we should take a look at.
I just had if I may interject on that point, had a conversation with Stephen McFadden, who's the Economic Development Director at the Port, and they are promoting some of that Franklin County land that we have available there by the Hapo Center for that very reason, for restaurants, perhaps more hotels, other commercial enterprises in that area. So that's getting a lot of attention in the economic development community.
Oh, good. I just wanted to point out that I think the staff out there is doing a great job, and they should be recognized for it.
I'll just add, if I might quickly, it's good to hear that Commissioner Mullen shares the broader support for doing something with that land. This is an issue that was discussed, I think, before either of you joined the board, and unfortunately there was never sufficient support, but it sounds like now there is. I agree with you that making better use of those lawn areas is a good thing to do, so thank you.
Also had more discussions on the cancellation of the contract with Lourdes with Greater Columbia Mental Health, and still have not gotten the answers that I'm looking for. But now it sounds like it's going to affect our jail and some of the services there. So other than that, that was my week last week, so thank you.
So at the end of the month, pretty light week for me too. Just the Ben Franklin Workforce Development Executive, Pasco Housing, and I too, in conversations with the chairman of the board of the Greater Columbia Behavioral Health, also with Lourdes, and with the people that are working with the behavioral health now about what's going on with the jail and services there. So there's some answers that we're looking for, and that I'm looking for and trying to get. So with that, we'll move on down to public comment. Is there anybody for public comment?
Good morning, Commissioners. A couple of things for you this morning. Thankful for Mr. Bratton and Mr. Johnson's leadership and working with and trying to be cooperative with the City of Pasco in putting together joint development standards and specifications for work inside the donut hole. That will be very, very helpful for the development community to not have to be caught in between two sets of standards and two sets of things. That has been, it's long overdue. I'm thankful that that process is underway, and would certainly encourage you as the commissioners to support Mr. Bratton and Mr. Johnson in that process, and certainly try to get that process completed. I'm thankful for that. Another thing, I've been working diligently and hard with landowners with the City of Pasco. I met with Mr. Johnson briefly yesterday in discussing the possibility and a need that we have in our community of connecting currently where Burns Road and 52 intersect, taking Burns Road and extending it east to an intersection approximately where that alignment would hit Glade Road. It would help tremendously with the traffic that currently impacts Road 68 and all the development that's going to be happening to the north of the Burns Road alignment in that new UGA that has recently come in. It's certainly in the talking and the considering process right now, but wanted you to be aware that conversation is underway with the property owners, with the city of Pasco, and I'm trying to be helpful with the process, consider it, and if there's anything that is necessary for the process, it's starting, and I think that it would be helpful if you knew about it and would be helpful in that. And then, Mr. Mullen, when you just made a comment, I thought about it for a moment and I wrote it down and kind of thinking out loud, but what if the county were to get out of the RV park rental business, sell the Franklin County RV park there behind the Hapo Center, and use those proceeds to update the Hapo Center and to repair the parking lot and no longer be in competition with private business in the RV park rental and world. Just thought for consideration. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Welcome, Joe.
Thank you. Representative Joe Schmick, 9th District, making the rounds, trying to get to every county, which takes me a while, but I'm glad to be here. Would like to really answer questions that you might have about the session, and then I will address some concerns that I got coming out of session. So questions? Let's start with that.
Commissioners? You got a Snickers bar? You're going to be here a while.
Well, you only have so many minutes as I see by your agenda.
There's a whole bunch of questions, but I think the simple reality is that the split of political interests in Olympia today in this past session made it very difficult for our legislators representing Franklin County's interest to get much traction, being that you're perpetually in the minority. Disappointed that Senator Elias came forward with a transportation package that really hurt the Public Works Trust Fund and the Crab Board, a number of other things that we rely on, frankly, for preservation and maintenance of county roads. No money to speak of for that, which is one of our primary needs. So it could probably go on for a long time, but I'm just going to say that I appreciate the efforts of our local representatives from the 16th and the 8th and the 9th. I think from my perspective, you did what you could under the circumstances, and appreciate you always being available when we called. Thanks.
Commissioner Mullen, any questions?
To save time, what were the most impactful ideas or laws that were passed here recently? Or
Again, we don't have that much time, but let's talk about a couple things that will directly affect that we were able to stop. Let's start with that.
okay, thank you.
The governor's setback on all waters. I think it was House Bill 1838 we were able to stop. That would have had setbacks from every stream, waterway, 250 feet. Now think about that.
Every canal, too.
Yeah, but think about that and how much ground we were able to stop that. We are for salmon recovery. I don't think anyone here would say, no, we don't want salmon recovery. There was not science that backed that. They cited an old study that, because I'm a legislator, I go back and look at those studies. That study was a conglomerate of articles, was never proven, but the government came out and said, well, it's done history. This is acceptable. This is how we're going to do this. No, that's wrong. And when you go back and read the background information, there was not science to back that. Another issue, you remember the sheriff down in Clickitat County was killing wolves down there. There was a bill to take that authority all away. We were able to stop that bill to allow the sheriff in narrow circumstances to take care of the public and safety by taking care of the wolves. I was in Columbia County yesterday, and that's getting to be a bigger and bigger issue up there. We are going to see the same proliferation southeast Washington that we've seen in northeast Washington, and that's a problem. But we were able to stop that bill going across. I would like to address a couple things that I think I would like to know more about your public health, or not public health, mental health, and the contract issues that you're having to understand where you're at, what the problems are, and where we're going, because that affects my area. And so I'd like to know more about that, maybe outside of here, so we have more time to discuss that. We did see an increase for the Medicaid mental health providers through the, when I say Medicaid, that's MCOs, managed care organizations that are responsible for the Medicaid population. They saw a 7% increase in reimbursement. Overall, the problem that we find ourselves is that once a person is licensed to be able to care and to get as a certified counselor, 4,000 hours. They have to have a supervised to achieve before they can get their full licensure. And once you find these people get their licensure, they move away out of the Medicaid population to private practice, because they find I can fill my book of business, I get paid better, and it's leaving us short in the Medicaid population. That seems to be a revolving door. So we're hopeful that this increase in pay will help those folks stay in working with that population. Another issue that
Excuse me, Representative, if I might just speak to that. Unless you're fairly regularly working in this arena, most folks are not aware that the state has created two stovepipes, if you will, two columns, whatever you want to call them. One is MCO, the managed care organizations that you just spoke about. The other, the ASOs, the Administrative Services Organization. Our local Greater Columbia Behavioral Health is an ASO, and the Medicaid funds you're talking about are over here with the MCOs, and they do some health, mental health for certain
and
select.
where the ASOs fit into this puzzle is
Yeah.
when a person doesn't qualify for Medicaid and they don't have private insurance. That's when they fall into that area. And if you recall, Commissioner Peck, we've called the ASOs RHCs. We've had about 4 different name changes.
Yes, we have.
But there are 10 regions across the state, and you are in the Greater Columbia Health.
Behavioral health.
Thank you. Group. And one of the better ones, because of leadership of Mr. Rick Weaver out of Yakima, has a very pragmatic way of dealing with them.
It's been a good organization. The audit history from the state is as clean as any I've seen in any of the 9 or 10 regions around the state. But I just wanted to highlight the fact that mental health services really are divided by the state into these different buckets depending on how it's paid for. The MCO piece you spoke to with the Medicare and Medicaid increases is the small part of the mental health arena. The ASOs are the big piece, and so going forward, any additional funding you can help steer to the ASO side would be very helpful.
And I think
Thanks.
that
And we just passed the 1/10 mental health tax here in Franklin County, something I've been advocating for as long as you and I have known each other, which is a long time. And our board approved that, and so a lot of things happening on that front that probably the other commissioners can get with you outside the meeting and give you more detail.
Thank you. I made a note of that. That's why I brought my book, so I can write stuff down. One thing, the 988 funding, which is the suicide hotline funding, where the legislature passed that last year, I worked a lot on that bill, and a lot of the things that I put in there were all stripped out in the final version. And here's my concerns about that, is how are you going to deal in the rural areas and deliver suicide services? And that is a big issue because Franklin County and a lot of the areas that I serve are different than King, Pierce, and Snohomish County, an urban setting. So how are we going to deliver those settings? And I am still concerned about that. I've also interjected myself into that conversation, just so you know, because how we deliver those services in a rural area is going to be so much different than in urban areas. And I am concerned about where this is going. And so I continue to work on that because they're taking a lot of money, and that is a tax on every cell phone in the state, and that money, and it's deriving quite a bit of money. So just so people understand, but I continue to work on that. My dog in the fight is the rural areas. Other questions? Because I've eaten up most of your.
Well, I've got a few questions
Sure.
here. First off, the no sales of gas-powered vehicles 2030. Can you speak of that a little
Yes.
bit? I mean, now, this is something that can be overturned if we get the proper people in place, but please speak of that and what transpired there, and is it all partisan? We already talked about this a little bit. I'm not sure. You thought there were
I believe that there were some Democrats that voted opposing that. No Republican opposed or supported that measure. There's no way. We don't have this structure. We don't have enough supply of electricity. It's going to take, in order to make this happen, we're going to have to see a 70% increase of base load. And base load, I want to define that as I'll define it this way. It's not windmill, it's not solar, which are intermittent loads. And the one thing when people start talking about load and capacity is that when you're heavy usage of loads, morning and evening, and that's usually when you have the least amount of solar and wind. And so the overall timing of when renewables in the way they are now, when their supply is available, is not conducive to when we actually need it. And that's why there's a difference between base load and intermittent load. So that explanation, we're so short. We don't have grid capacity. We don't have all these things to even get there. And think about what you see out on the road. And let's just talk about transportation. I see no even possibility of an electric 18-wheeler tractor that could be out there on the road. There's some inherent problems even with the electric cars. And I've looked at that since I travel back and forth to Olympia. I don't know if you were aware, but in the wintertime when it's cold, you lose 40% of your capacity. And if you had a car that has a 400-mile range, take 40% of that off, that means that I couldn't even go from Olympia and go home without stopping and recharging. And as I recall, driving around the district, there are no fast charging stations. So just be thinking about they're not there. So I don't believe that it is even attainable, all electric cars by 2030. I do believe that restricts the choice of the consumer for them to be able to choose what's best for them. It might work in Seattle. I don't know. I just even see that as just to give a 220 hookup will take several hours to charge your car. A 110 hookup will take over 2 days to charge your car. And these fast charging stations that you see, like Tesla has, you've seen them, 440. And that's why they can charge in a half hour. And so There's some real challenges here. We don't have the infrastructure. We just don't have the power.
There's there's one other challenge in this equation that you don't hear talked about much. It's the federal commerce law, not the proper title, but you know what I mean. Imagine somebody from Post Falls, Idaho, who wants to deliver commercial products to Portland and wants to pass through Washington. Are you going to say that they can't drive their gasoline-powered vehicle? And if all we have are electric vehicles, how many gas stations will we have, et cetera? You can see how the situation goes. But in the transportation package that was just passed, you know that at one point there was an attempt to put a 6 cents tax on petroleum products coming out of Washington into Oregon. And when it became clear that that was going to violate federal law, that was dropped, and that's when we lost the money for CRAB and Public Works Trust Fund out of the budget. That was the makeup when the legislature realized that they can't tax Oregon, for example. So when you go to all electric vehicles, you're impeding interstate commerce, and that to me is the legal death knell for it, but we'll see.
Well, and just think about your products that are raised out here in Franklin County and get those to market, period.
One other
Yes.
consideration there, and that is the gas tax. The article I read, the gas tax will go away because we're not selling gas for gas out. Now they're talking about a user fee for the electrical cars on the miles they drive. Correct?
That one, I think if you're going to see a vehicle miles traveled, this is Joe now talking.
Okay.
You'll see that for everything.
Yep.
Think about the gas tax. I don't know how we could go away from it because we have bonded against that money stream
Yes.
for 25 years. And just because we no longer collect it, we've still got obligations and debt out there that we will have to pay off and service.
Okay. So we've alerted the public to what's going on there. Now, the gun magazine, high capacity, that has been passed. The governor has signed it, and it goes into law June 1st?
July 1st.
July 1st. Explain to the public what the high capacity, what are we talking?
That means that any magazine over 10 rounds, you will no longer be able to, you can have them, but you're not going to be able to sell them, purchase them in the state.
But you can have them. You're grandfathered in if you have them.
For now,
Okay.
until that
Yeah.
decided for something different.
I think it also prohibits transfer, which
Yes.
is distinguished from selling in the law.
Yes.
You
And
can't
that's
sell
also
them, nor can you transfer.
And that also means transfer even among family members.
But that takes effect
July
July 1st. So up until July 1st, it can still
Yes.
take place. Okay. Last thing, Joe, that I want to bring up, and hopefully we're bringing this to the attention, and it's going to be tough with the legislature that's in there right now. But we have got to get back voter integrity. And there's no better reason or proof that we need to do this than our Secretary of State, Kim Wyman, going to work for the Biden administration. Now, they obviously have seen something very successful here in the state of Washington over the years and decades. We need the legislature to start pushing now to get away from the absentee ballot and get back to going to a precinct showing your ID to vote. This is something we've got to push on. If we want to change this legislature, we have to push for this and be insistent and determined.
Well, you're not going to get an argument from me.
I know.
I've always been an advocate of in-person voting, and I think we need to return that to restore the faith of the public, total faith.
Lead the charge.
Yeah. We've had bills, I think almost every session dropped on this, and we just need to change the makeup of the legislature, which we're going to do.
Thank you, Joe.
Anything else? I've taken more of my time than I should have, but happy to answer any questions. And would like to know more about your mental health.
Thank
and
you.
What's going on.
Just one question on the transfer of high-capacity guns or clips. So you can't pass them down to your kids? Is that,
Ask me afterwards.
okay, all right. It just, it made me think of that when you said.
Well, we
when
can
you can't
discuss this
transfer.
a
All right.
little bit more.
All right,
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you
for
very
your
much.
time. Is there anybody else for public comment? And thank you for your service, Joe.
Thank you.
Hello, y'all. Wanted to talk briefly regarding that Greater Columbia mental health piece. Right now, we have the MOU that was in place that addressed the transitioning of offenders with mental health issues coming out of the jail, going into the community. And that MOU was a small amount. I mean, you're under $3,000 for 2 years. And that was a 0.5 position that was there for it. It started in February of 2021. It's already gone through 1 full year, and then the way they've got it is supposed to cancel out here on April 10th. And off of that, so you've almost got another year, a half a year into it. So there isn't that much that's remaining off of that MOU for that. I don't know why it got pulled. Maybe you've heard something that I'm not aware of. I just got involved in this thing last week, Thursday. I've made some calls, I've sent some emails out and stuff. I really haven't got a whole lot back yet from it, other than Greater Columbia is cutting those funds off, what's left of it. And it's going over to comprehensive health care. And we haven't engaged in any conversation with comprehensive health care. I know that the sheriff is very adamant that he would like to finish off, at least at minimum, the rest of this MOU for the year for what's remaining in that cost. If I can't get that money from Greater Columbia to finish that off, then I'll try to pull it out of my budget to finish it off for the year. That is the plan, unless the commissioners is doing some other kind of MOU with the comprehensive care. I'm not aware of it. But I know that the only impact that it happens is to the offenders leaving. We get enough that get released from the jail in a last minute thing where there's no plan set up in place yet, and it ends up falling through the cracks, and they come back really quickly, a lot of them. And with that transition and that help in that process with the mental health people being able to line those things up, it really helps them get a good start. So that's who it impacts the most. And we're trying to make sure that stays in place. We'll keep that with Lords, and I'll try to finish off at minimum the rest of this MOU for the year. That is the plan.
Thank you.
Yep.
Have you spoken with the operational leadership at GCBH, the staff?
I have. I talked with Karen Richardson yesterday.
Okay. Have you spoken with Cindy Saunders?
She just in emails.
Okay.
And she basically had transferred that over to Karen.
Okay.
And Karen agreed. She signed the MOU, which should have ended at the end of this year. And I didn't get an explanation as to why it got pulled.
Okay. Well, maybe we can meet offline, and I'll help you get some more answers.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else for public comment?
If I can just interject here, since Joe's here also, the coroner's office throughout the states are having a hard time with pathologists. Right now, as you know, we take our autopsies over to Snohomish County in Everett. They've had a third one, pathologist who's from Canada, and because of visa issues, he's having to leave the country and go back to Canada to work. Now, our issue is they're about to cut us off of autopsies. So we've been working with the legislators, and Joe, if you could bend an ear to with coroners and medical examiners for the ability to get some attract pathologists. There's a need of about 50 to 60 pathologists in the country right now, and there's like 17 coming out of school ready to do their fellowships. I think it's a shame that, you know, I joke that this pathologist came across the border the wrong place. He came across the north instead of the south. that here we have a pathologist that's willing to work, do the job, and yet we can't get him to stay because of visa issues. That's just ridiculous. There's proposals that would increase our budget for autopsies, almost triple or double what we're doing right now. I'm at 40, and they're projecting we'll have to go up to 80 a year, $80,000 a year for us to attract pathologists. So we've talked with some legislators about doing some debt relief to attract pathologists into the state, and even go more regional, so we could have some. Right now, we don't have any other than Spokane County. We don't have pathologists on this side of the state. They don't want to come over and work by themselves, and they want to work with others, which I can understand. They want to be able to have that camaraderie with others. So just a good note to that's a challenge that we're facing. And Joe, I hope that, as you hear that come through the grapevine, that you'll be supportive of that. Thank you.
Is there anybody else for public comment? Anybody on the phone, Keith?
I do have one caller on the phone. Good morning. Is this Cindy?
Yes, it is.
You are in the commissioners meeting and you have the floor for public comment.
Okay, thank you so much. So this is Cindy Saunders from Greater Columbia Behavioral Health, and I just wanted to address briefly some of the discussion regarding the jail funding in Franklin County. So there's two things going on here. One is that Greater Columbia Behavioral Health had a contract with Lourdes Counseling Center to provide crisis services. In part of that contract, there was an allotment for jail proviso funding, and that funding was divided between Benton County and Franklin County. The MOU that people are discussing is really an MOU saying that the jail will allow Lourdes Counseling Center to go into the jail to provide those services. So it is a subsidiary of the contract. So when the contract with Lourdes is terminated, then that MOU is no longer valid. However, I want to make sure that everybody understands the funding is actually around $3,000 per month that's allocated to Franklin County Jail, and that funding is going to continue. There's no cancellation of that funding. There's no cancellation of the services provided. All of that is still going to be provided to Franklin County exactly the way that it's provided now. The difference is that we are not allowed to give federal funding to a provider we don't have a contract with. So because we will no longer have a contract with Lourdes Counseling Center for this service, we cannot give that funding to Lourdes anymore. So that funding will be allocated to Comprehensive Health Care, who is the new provider. And so that same exact funding, the same exact services are going to be provided to Franklin County Jail. The only difference is that they will be provided by a comprehensive staff member as opposed to a Lourdes Counseling Center staff member. So it's also my understanding, I just want to point out that we have explained this situation to several people, but it looks like the barrier is that we've been told comprehensive health care is not going to be allowed into Franklin County Jail. And so I'm not sure where that's coming from and what we can do about that, but I want to make sure that everybody understands the ASO, Greater Columbia Behavioral Health, is going to continue providing this funding to Franklin County Jail and is going to continue to provide a provider to provide these services. So if the jail needs somebody to come out and help with jail transitioning, there is somebody available, and that's going to be comprehensive health care. Are there any questions for me?
Questions?
No questions. Thank you for calling in.
Thank you.
Commander Saltemeyer, if you wouldn't mind taking a question. You're the jail commander, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Have you proposed or discussed any prohibition on comprehensive coming into the jail and providing those services?
I have not.
Okay. Or do you have any opposition to it?
The only thing that I have heard is my discussion with the sheriff specifically, and I know that the commitment with the MOU, how it was set up, was between Lords and ourselves with the funding coming in. So I
Right.
know the sheriff was wanting to stay with that MOU at minimum till the end of that MOU. Now, I don't, that contract is specifically with Lords. That's our contract with them on that MOU, with the understanding that this funding was coming in from Greater Columbia Health, but the MOU was specifically with Lords,
Yeah, and I think,
not with them.
I think she just discussed and explained, being federal funds and not having a contract with Lords, they can't provide those funds, but they can provide them to comprehensive. So my question is, are you aware of any opposition from anybody that says that comprehensive can't come provide these services?
The only thing that I'm aware of is what the sheriff had mentioned to me about he was staying with Lords. I don't know about somebody being kept out of it. And I know the sheriff had said that if the commissioners want to sign an MOU that deals with comprehensive to come in, that, I mean, he can't stop that either. But I know that if she is saying, Cindy there, if she's saying that the funding is still coming to the jail, then why can't the funding come to the jail and the jail keep its contract with Lords to allow those funds to continue to be paid? Now, maybe she can explain that, but if the funding
Well,
supposedly...
she did when she called. She said they're federal funds and they can't be provided to an entity with whom GCBH doesn't have a contract. And
Okay.
GCBH has a contract with Comprehensive, but does not have one with Lords, as we all know. So those funds can flow to Comprehensive.
Well, could they have a contract with the jail?
Yeah, I think we probably ought to take it offline at this point rather than eat up a lot of the board's time. But I think what's clear is the funds are available and Comprehensive is the provider. And if the sheriff wants to go a different direction, then I'll look forward to hearing why.
Okay. Yeah,
Thank you.
because I don't have that information.
Yeah, okay, thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you. And Commissioner Peck, next time, please address the chairman if you want to call somebody to the mic. Okay, so with that, is there anybody else for?
I would encourage you commissioners to consider that you're not being given the opportunity to decide who does business with our county. And I think that's important. It's what you three were elected to do, was to decide who does business with our county, and would encourage you to do so. Thank you.
Anybody else on the phone, Keith?
Not on the phone, no.
Anybody else for public comment? Okay, with that, we'll move down to administration office business. Keith?
Yes, thank you. The agenda list, an update on redistricting. There's not a lot to update, just for the public's awareness and answer any questions the commissioners may have. I had hoped that Sean Sant would be able to be available. He's not available this morning. So I just point out there were some questions from the auditor's office, the election staff last week regarding some data on the map that we had adopted back in January. We've been providing that GIS data to them. I think we have everything under control in terms of what elections needs for putting the upcoming elections together. We're obviously still under the cloud of litigation. That trial is scheduled in May. I know that they're doing pretrial discovery right now, and that process will take place as it does. And if the board would like a more detailed briefing of the litigation, then we could perhaps arrange that for next week when Mr. Sant's available or the outside attorneys are available. But other than that, there hasn't been it hasn't been changed in the last week. So I just wanted to make sure that the board had an opportunity to answer any questions that they had.
Are there any questions?
I do have a question. Should there have been a resolution made when we adopted that map? And if so, why wasn't it?
Yeah, historically, when the board has adopted new redistricting plans, I think the experience in Franklin County has been done by resolution, but there's not a legal requirement that a separate resolution be done. It was done by a floor vote, which has the same legal effect as a formal resolution. So that vote that was taken in January was our vote, and it satisfies the legal requirements.
Okay.
It does satisfy the legal requirements.
Yes. Yeah,
Because
a floor
this-
vote would have the same effect as a formal resolution.
Well, there's two issues, though. One is compliance with the census-driven redistricting, and the other is compliance with the lawsuit outcome. One has been accomplished, the second is still pending.
Well, the question is on the first one, has it been accomplished? Because that's the direction that I have been in touch with people in the courthouse and the elections office, and they were concerned because there wasn't clear direction.
Yeah.
Now, if we need to pass a resolution, we better get it done, because I don't want this to be another hiccup,
Right.
as what we've already had with summary judgment, with some other things that have taken place. Now, it looks to me as if there might be a little bit of an undermining happening for the commissioners' way forward here. And that troubles me, because there was movement and something done on summary judgment without our informed consent or explicit direction. And now we have given informed consent and explicit direction, and yet we don't have a resolution. It troubles me, because it looks as if we're being undermined here, and I'm not happy with that. I want to make sure that our voice is being heard, and if we need to get a resolution passed, we need to get a resolution passed. So we have a clear cut forward with where we stand on this, and there's no more confusion.
Sure. I specifically addressed that question with Mr. Sant earlier in the week, and he informed me that the resolution is not an essential step, but if the board would prefer that we draft one, we can do that. But as far as he's concerned, as far as the outside attorney is concerned, as far as Franklin County's legal position is concerned, that is our adopted map until the court.
I, for one, want to leave no doubt, I would like a resolution.
I would like a resolution as well, as because obviously there was some miscommunication with the elections department. I mean, they acted like they were unaware of the vote that we put forward. So, yes, I'd like to see a resolution on that.
We can certainly draft that then.
Thank you.
I haven't heard from Commissioner Peck. Would he like a resolution?
I think a majority of the board has spoken, so it's fait accompli, but if that's the direction you want to go, I can go along.
Okay.
I just would remind, and I'm not telegraphing or signaling anything, but a decision's been made, or legal counsel has affirmed that it's binding. You want to take it to another vote, that reopens the door for people to change their votes and their perspective. Not saying that'll happen, not telegraphing anything, just saying that's always an option.
Well, I have a problem with our legal counsel on summary judgment, so I question their integrity here on this. So I am, for one, want a resolution passed. Keith, anything else? Go ahead.
My comment would be that obviously the elections department wasn't aware, because there was no resolution. So I think that this would clear up any miscommunication and set them in the right path forward to know exactly what we meant. So, thank you.
And it also affects IS, because they too need to get the maps drawn up. And they too were in a state of confusion. So just to give clarity to the departments that need to be working on this.
I'll be happy to draft that and bring it before the board then.
Anything else?
Yeah, just one other item. We had talked briefly about the possibility of a night meeting next week, and the board had given preliminary approval to move forward with that. However, I was not aware at the time that the Planning Commission also has their meeting scheduled for that night, and they had already scheduled theirs in advance. So out of not just courtesy to them, but to avoid conflict, I'm recommending that we move our night meeting to the 19th. So next Tuesday, the 12th, we would have our regular day meeting, and have our night meeting on the 19th, the following Tuesday, if that's acceptable to the board.
I'm good with that.
It interferes with my schedule, but,
Well, and if there's a different night that you want to move a night meeting to, I'm certainly open to those suggestions. I just didn't want to create a conflict with the planning commission.
no, I've already, like I said, I had set my agenda for the night meeting being next week. You have to give 2 weeks' notice in the Connell graphic to announce that meeting, don't you?
No, not to just change the location. It'll be a regular meeting of the board.
You're just changing the time
Changing the time, correct.
and location,
No, the location will still be here in this room.
as opposed to the Hapo Center at night.
Correct.
Sounds like a time and location change to me, but whatever the will
Well,
of the board
we had
is.
not anticipated having that night meeting at the Hapo Center.
Oh, okay. How did you put it in the graphic then, if there was no
I
location?
don't think we,
Okay. All right, thank you.
Are you good with the,
Whatever the will of the board is, I'm fine with.
you'll be able to attend if it's a night meeting on the 19th?
Yes.
Is it the 19th or the 18th?
April the 19th.
19th, okay.
That's Tuesday.
All right. We'll move that to the 19th then. All right, we're down to public comment, second public comment. Is there anybody on the phone, Keith?
No, sir.
Okay. We got movement.
Good morning, George Dockstutter. I'd like to see the county commissioners make the first Tuesday of every month a night meeting. Then you'd have more participation from the constituents of this county to come and speak their pieces if they've got anything to say. And the other thing I'd like to see a night meeting when we decide how we're going to spend all that damn money the federal government is supposedly giving back to us that they took from us. And come up with different ideas. That's a lot of money, and so far all I've heard is upgrading Hapo and doing a communications deal out towards Palouse Falls. We need to spend that money in ways that we can reduce the expenditures from the funds that have been appropriated by you so we can build up a reserve account and start getting money back in our road system since we're not getting any help from the state. Thank you.
Anybody else? Public comment? Nobody on the phone? Keith, we're going to move into a closed session, collective bargaining. You want to take us into that?
Yes, thank you. Requesting a closed session under RCW 42.30.140, paragraph 4, subparagraph B, to discuss collective bargaining. Would ask that the members of the board, the clerk, county administrator, and the human resources director to be allowed to participate. Up to 15 minutes ought to be adequate, with the option of maybe coming out early.
We're going to extend the closed session for 5 minutes. Okay, we've come out of closed session, and is there any other business for the good of the county?
I would make a motion that we change our representation on the Greater Columbia Behavioral Health Board.
I'll second that with discussion.
Well, as part of the broader discussion, I'll point out that our comments and discussion earlier today about Greater Columbia Behavioral Health, if it wasn't clear, what the GCBH representative was telling you, Cindy Saunders, is that the funds for those jail services can only be contracted with the provider. They cannot be provided to the jail. Previously, they were provided to Lords, not to the jail. So if the board desires to not use comprehensive for some reason, that'll be lost revenue. But the contract that's being discussed, to be clear, is between GCBH and the provider, previously Lords, now comprehensive, never with the jail. So if the sheriff wishes to continue to try and follow a contract that no longer exists, that would be fine. I suppose he can try to do that, won't be legal. Second point, it's clear to me that some members, and I'm not going to point to my fellow commissioners because I don't know precisely where you stand, but your comments certainly lead me to think that you somehow think that there was some nefarious activity or intent or something with regard to the change in the GCBH contract. As you recall, there were 9 voting members of the GCBH board that ended that contract with Lords. 8 of them voted yes, including the chairman with whom Chairman Didier has apparently regular contact. He too voted to end the contract. I'm the only one that didn't vote to end it, and I abstained on the premise that I didn't want to further aggravate relationships between Lords and Franklin County. How anyone sees any sort of fault or defect in that vote and that performance is unclear to me. I want to be on the record now that the action was taken is that I had no involvement with the staff or the legal counsel with respect to advocating or opposing that action to end that contract. Third point that needs to be on the record is that the contract was terminated for convenience, not for cause, and it is common practice in government in this country, especially in this state, for contracts to have a termination for convenience expressly for the purpose of avoiding conflicts when there might be a cause, concern, or issue. Now, when you terminate for convenience, it doesn't say that there isn't potential cause. It simply says that we're electing to use the termination for convenience. So if you want to change a representative to GCBH, knock yourselves out. But I would ask each of you to articulate on the record what sort of defect have you seen in my performance as a member of the GCBH board? I'd like you to articulate that because I think I've been extremely straight up and fair and have fulfilled those duties fully and then some. And then lastly, I would point out that discussions about meetings between the chair and the CEO of Lords are now well documented. The efforts to place Mr. Baumann on the board of directors for Lords is now well documented. So if we want to get into ethics, go ahead and open that door. But for today, at least, I would ask you to articulate exactly what it is you would have done differently as a member of that GCBH board.
Having no participation, there's nothing I could have done differently because I'm not aware of what the decisions that were being made. They were never presented to the board.
You don't bring transportation decisions to this board and discuss them. You make those decisions as part of the transportation board.
Okay.
So you're creating a different standard. You've just said you have no insight as to the discussions, yet you find my performance somehow inadequate. That's remarkable.
I never said your performance was inadequate.
Well, then what's the purpose? Again, if somebody else wants to serve on it, fine, knock yourselves out. I got plenty of committees.
Sure, I know you do.
And I've had others added by the state recently. I think this is an important one, and I'd like to keep doing it. But if somebody else or the will of the board is to make a change, go for it. But at least have the common decency, the respect, articulate to the people what you think the defect is in the vote that I took and the manner I took it and the positions I've taken.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We've had discussion. Any further discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the question was posed to you as well. Do you have any response?
I have no statement to be made to you, Commissioner
Okay.
Peck.
Great, thanks.
I don't owe you an explanation.
No, it was a request, and you've declined. Thank you.
There you go. So all in favor of changing the appointment to the Greater Columbia Board of Health, please signify by voting yes.
Yes.
Or aye. Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Okay, with the removal of the representation, I nominate Rocky Mullen to be the new representation for the Greater Columbia Behavioral Health. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second to put Commissioner Mullen on the Greater Columbia Behavioral Health. Discussion. Hearing none.
Robert's rules allows the maker of the motion to speak first. I'm only delaying to offer that courtesy. I do have comments.
I have no statement at this point.
I have nothing to say.
Okay. I've got a couple things to share. You have just reaffirmed, I think, very clearly that this is a politically driven agenda. And the evidence of that is that neither of you can or is willing to articulate any shortcoming or defect in my service on that board. Now, imagine that if boards start taking this kind of action with the other 25 or so boards and committees that we serve on. It opens the door, not unlike the one that I've spoken to publicly before about randomly changing employment stands and positions and grades in the county. It is it's unfortunate that you've allowed politics to filter into this board in your decision making, and it's clear to me that you have. And so I'll just close by saying this is a second request for either of you to articulate the reasons for your desiring a change or any shortcomings or defects in my performance on GCBH.
Commissioner Peck, you eliminated the Greater or Lords for convenience.
No, I didn't. I did not vote on it.
You didn't vote, and you didn't argue on behalf of Lords, who is our hospital. And that is why I'm taking you off. You should have lobbied and voted and not removed yourself.
So the vote was 8-0.
As persuasive as you are, Commissioner Peck, I think you could have swayed some people to be on our behalf for
The
Lords.
vote, including your good friend, the chairman of GCBH, was 8-0 to end the contract.
Okay.
Who brought up the idea to change the contract?
Certainly not me. In fact, I suspect I was one of the last board members to know. And if you've been told otherwise, you've been misled. Absolutely. Anyone suggesting that I proposed this or even hinted or suggested remotely, absolutely false.
Where did it come from?
It was brought forward by,
I just want answers. I mean, that's.
well, no, I don't blame you. I was one of, I guess was now, soon to be, one of the newer members to GCBH. It was on the agenda, not at my request, and I had no foreknowledge until it showed up on the agenda. So if someone has suggested to you that somehow I played a role in ending this contract, that is absolutely 110% patently false. You've got bad information.
Who
In
brought
the
it
face,
forward?
I recall, well, executive session limits how much I can say about the discussion. I can point out that out of the 9 counties, 8 voted to terminate for convenience, and 1, myself, abstained for reasons I've already articulated. It seems a little unlikely that the newer member, or maybe the newest member of GCBH, is going to effectively argue against an 8-0 vote.
It wasn't voted on, Commissioner Peck. You could have argued on behalf of Lords before the vote.
Well, given that you
Call
were
the
not at,
question. Call the
given that
question.
you were not at the meeting,
I move to call the question. Do I have a second?
Second.
There's been a motion, or there's been a motion to call the question. There's been a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Now,
opposed, nay. Nice way to end public discussion. Let's take the public out of it.
oh, you've done it
Nicely
before,
done.
Commissioner Peck.
Nicely done,
So
gentlemen.
with
Mr.
that,
Transparent.
with that, there's been a motion to appoint Rocky Mullen to the Greater Columbia Board of Health. And a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay?
Let it be known that it's passed. Is there any other business for the good of the county? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.